Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
You could just actually ask
Go ahead,
my question, Mr. Trump. You didn't let me ask my question.
You've been asking a question for 10 minutes. Please sit down. Please, go ahead. Go ahead.
How did those impact your opinions on the allegations against?
Well, it does impact my opinion. You know why? Because she's shocked that I picked her. It's like in a state of shock.
I'm not thinking, Mr.
That's
President.
okay. I know you're not thinking. You never do.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
In a tweet this week.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now that you've answered several questions on trade, I'd like to turn
Don't
to Judge
do that.
Kavanaugh.
Do you have?
President,
excuse me. Do you have a question on trade? We'll do one or two more questions
you
on
answered
trade.
several questions
Okay,
on
don't do
trade.
that. That's not nice.
Mr. President,
and besides that, somebody is before you. Excuse me. Don't do that. Do you have a question on trade?
You answered several questions.
Do you have
on
a
trade.
question on trade?
My question is on Judge
Okay,
Kavanaugh.
please, yes,
You said
please.
the FBI should interview whoever that they believe is appropriate. Does that include Julie Swetnick, the third accuser? And can you promise to release the full findings
give me
from
your
the
question,
FBI
please.
after they finish their report, Mr. President?
Give me your question, please.
He is such a nasty SOB, especially to women reporters. Now, we know he hates the media. You know, every rally he does within the first 60 seconds, the media is the enemy of the people. But, oh, my God. So this was, reporters trying to ask questions because there are no questions to ask about the new NAFTA. The biggest change is that it's not called NAFTA. It's called Usmucka. I'm looking at it. I don't know what's Usmucka. You know, us U.S. Mexican Canada agreement. Usmucka. Cars are going to cost more, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to sell milk and protein concentrates in Canada. So that's a wash for most people, right? Right. So, I mean, come on. This is going to do as much to iron out the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, as, Trump's agreement with Kim Jong-un to denuclearize North Korea did. It's a pointless trade deal just for show. The summit with North Korea is just for show. The fake Kavanaugh investigation is just for show. This is the Potemkin presidency. Those stacks and stacks of folders, remember those full of blank pages at Trump's big no conflict of interest dog and pony show when he took office? That should have been emblematic of the emptiness of the administration, okay? If Trump has a post-presidency library, it will be full of empty books. This man is so empty of transparency. It's so bizarre. It's so weird. This whole thing is crazy. But I will tell you, you know what's standing between us and 40 years of having a sexual predator? Well, the second one on the Supreme Court. I mean, it's just like a club now. It's like an elite little, prick club, really. It's like the most amazing thing that we're turning the Supreme Court into. But the only thing that stands between us seems to be Jeff Flake, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. Now, Jeff Flake did say he's not going to be satisfied with a cursory investigation. He wants a real investigation. Mitch McConnell, on the other hand, says, we'll vote Friday. I swear to God, we'll vote Friday. And, for him to vote Friday, for the Senate to vote Friday, that means that tomorrow is the deadline for the investigation. Tomorrow, that's it. Because they have to give 2 days notice ahead of a vote. And that's what he said last night. He just said, screw it. We're going to vote this week.
So soon, I expect we'll hear that the conclusions of the expert prosecutor,
who you didn't let question him,
aren't reliable, or that the FBI's investigation was not infinite or endless enough for their liking. Maybe we'll hear the real issue is not these uncorroborated allegations of misconduct after all.
Misconduct?
But rather the fact that Judge Kavanaugh, now listen to this, drank beer
No one cares.
in high school and in college.
You are so smarmy.
Or the fact that he was rightfully angry. Who wouldn't be?
He
That
threatened.
his good name and his family have been dragged through the mud with a campaign of character assassination based on allegations that lack any corroboration.
Oh my God.
Who wouldn't be angry about that, Mr. President?
Who would threaten
Their goalposts keep shifting,
that what comes around goes around?
but their goal hadn't moved an inch, not an inch. The goal's been the same all along. And so let me make it very clear. The time for endless delay and obstruction has come to a close. Judge Kavanaugh's nomination is out of committee. We're considering it here on the floor. And, Mr. President, we'll be voting this week.
Conservatism is a racket.
It's a total and complete racket. You delayed to the point of, it just didn't hear it, Merrick Garland's confirmation. Just completely, not only delayed it, but refused to let any Republican members meet with him. He came from the D.C. circuit. He is actually Kavanaugh's boss. And you wouldn't hear, and you wouldn't allow any of your members to meet with one Merrick Garland. Also, you actually said out loud that you did not want Kavanaugh to be the nominee because it would be too difficult to confirm him. Because, Mitch McConnell, you knew on July 7th, 2 days before he was picked, you were recommending Kethledge and you were recommending Hardiman because they were easier to confirm. You knew that Brett Kavanaugh had lots of crap in his background. You knew that Brett Kavanaugh had lied to the Senate in 2004 about stolen emails, in 2006 about stolen emails. You knew that, I mean, his opinions were publicly known. That's not what you were afraid of. Those opinions were publicly known. Anybody that wanted to look up the Garza opinion of Kavanaugh, which was overturned by the Third Circuit, where he denied an immigrant woman an abortion because he felt like it, not because she wasn't constitutionally protected by our Constitution and entitled to the right to privacy under our Constitution, but because you were making a political statement. But those were publicly known, those opinions. No, what you were nervous about was that Kavanaugh had problems, that you made it clear in multiple phone calls with Donald Trump and Don McGahn on July 7th, 2 days before he picked Kavanaugh, that this lengthy paper trail, that this lengthy testimony that he had given in 4 and 6 were going to be problematic. You said it would pose difficulties for his confirmation. You said you were concerned about the volume of documents that he had created on at the White House when he was the Secretary of Staff under W, when he was the assistant to Ken Starr, when and you knew about this too. You knew about all of it. And that's why you're trying to rush it through. And that's why you're trying to say he drank beer. That is not the issue. The issue is he lied about how much and to black out. And why is that important? Because when he's like that, that's when he tends to whip it out. That's when he starts laughing at women. That's when he starts pushing them up against walls. That's when he starts removing their clothing. That's when he dangles his dangler in front of their face. That's when he starts to, assert himself sexually. A virgin. He lied about everything. He lied about things big and small. He lied about, listen, this is really funny. It's sad, but it's funny. We pulled from medium.com today. Well, there's a whole bunch. Current Affairs. Current Affairs has a 32-page article on all the lies Brett Kavanaugh told. 32 pages. I'll tweet it if you want later. Okay? But there are multiple new articles that detail his repeated lies to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Multiple articles. One of them was that 32-page article in Current Affairs magazine. Another one was an article that was written and put posted on medium.com, okay? And when we had our morning meeting, Scotty and I, to discuss, he had come across this one on Medium. I had come across the one on Current Affairs last night, and mine was too long. So I said, you know what, post yours. So his was called 29 Lies and Counting. All right, we had our morning conversation around 11:30 this morning, and then I come to work. And I begin to print out these articles. As you can see, I deforest most of North Carolina every single day. It's bad. I agree. I also eat jerky. And I know this pisses off, vegans. And I drink dairy. Not as much. It's bad for you, I found out. However, by the time I printed out the 29 Lies and Counting article, it had been updated to 31 lies and counting. 31 in the space from 11:30 till 12:30 when I got here. Okay, in the space of an hour. And the additional lies have to do with the fact that before Kavanaugh knew that Ramirez spoke to Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer for a New Yorker article, before that article became public, that she was actually accusing Brett Kavanaugh of, a party at Yale in the common room of in Lawrence Hall, which was like the freshman dorm, and there was a party or a gathering in one of the rooms that the soccer team had asked for. She was invited. She went, and at that particular one, he got so drunk. And something happened to her. She said all of a sudden she became very disoriented. All of a sudden she felt foggy. All of a sudden she felt weird. That, my friends, would be Quaaludes. However, she said that when that happened, all of a sudden she remembers a plastic penis being waved in front of her face. And then she remembers saying, that's not real. And then she remembers everybody laughing at her, laughing. Everybody who tells the story tell how they laughed at these women. They laughed and they laughed, just like Trump. Just like Trump demeans the women. Just like Trump. So sit down. You never think much. Excuse me? Right? Okay. Then she remembers a real penis. And she remembers somebody telling her to touch it or kiss it. And then she remembers Brett Kavanaugh pulling up his pants. Now, before that story was ever published in The New Yorker, it seems that Brett Kavanaugh began texting some of his Yale female classmates who may have been at that party. And he was texting them photographs of a wedding where he knew that Ms. Ramirez attended, because he was in the bridal party for the husband and she was in the bridal party for the wife. She was a bridesmaid. He was a groomsman. And there was a photo, except you can see Miss Ramirez. You could see Deborah Ramirez hiding behind one of the girls, not really wanting to be in that photo. Brett Kavanaugh was texting that photo to two of the women who were at that wedding saying, you need to vouch for me. You need to say that Deborah Ramirez, when she comes out with this story, what story? Well, there's going to be a story. You need to say that that didn't happen. You need to say that. And then he testified that he first heard about the Ramirez allegations. This is what he said. In the period since the New Yorker story, which was published on September 23rd. But NBC reports that Kavanaugh and his team were refuting Ramirez's allegations before they became public. Just like these damn emails. Same damn lie. He doesn't know how to lie very much. He always says the same thing. I only know about it because I read about it. I only know about it because I saw it in the media. I only know. Meanwhile, Leahy says to him all these years after he lied about receiving stolen emails from Orrin Hatch's staffer, Manny Miranda. He says, how did my email end up in your inbox? Well, I don't know. I only knew about it because it was in the paper. I only read about it in the paper. Well, NBC reports that there were texts between two of the women who were at the wedding, both friends of Kavanaugh, and they suggest that Brett Kavanaugh was personally talking with his former classmates about Deborah Ramirez's story in advance of the New Yorker article when her allegation became public. Now, these two women, at least one of them, she's a law partner at a very big law firm called Aiken Gump. Not an associate, but a partner at Aiken Gump. She said she has been trying to show these texts and a memo she wrote referring to these texts to the FBI, and they won't take them from her. They won't look at them.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Beach Week Ralph Club biggest contributor. What does the word Ralph mean in that?
That probably refers to throwing up. I'm known to have a weak stomach, and I always have. In fact, the last time I was here, you asked me about having ketchup on spaghetti. I always have had a weak stomach.
I don't know that I asked about ketchup on spaghetti, but
you didn't. Someone did,
okay.
And this is well known. Anyone who's known me, like a lot of these people behind me, have known me my whole life. Know, I got a weak stomach, whether it's with beer or with spicy food or anything.
What?
So the vomiting that you reference in the Ralph Club reference related to the consumption of alcohol.
Sarah, I was the top of my class academically.
Oh, my
Busted
God.
my butt in school.
Oh, my God.
Captain of the varsity basketball team. Got into Yale College. When I got into Yale College, got into Yale Law School. Worked my tail off.
I just need to interrupt just for a brief moment. He says he testified that he had no connections at Yale, that it was all his hard work. You do know that Brett Kavanaugh is a legacy, like George W. Bush was a legacy. He also got into Yale. That giant intellectual, George W. Bush, strategery, that man got into Yale because he's a legacy. And what is a legacy? Well, that's white man's affirmative action. That is what that is. That means if your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather went to an Ivy League school, you get some points for that added to your admissions score. And Brett Kavanaugh's grandpa did go to Yale, and he is a legacy. So, let's say there were two students, okay? And one wasn't a legacy, and one was, and they had the exact same grades. The legacy wins, because that is the elite's white affirmative action. Okay?
And did the word Ralph you used in your yearbook
I already answered the question. If you're,
did it relate to alcohol?
I like
You
beer.
haven't answered that.
I like beer. I don't know if you do.
Okay.
Do you like beer, Senator, or not? What do you like to drink?
Next one is
Senator, what do you like to
Judge,
drink?
have you?
I know you are, but what am
I
I?
don't know if it's buffed or boofed. How do you pronounce that?
That refers to flatulence. We were 16.
Okay. And so when your friend Mark Judge said put the same thing in his yearbook page back to you, he had the same meaning. It was flatulence.
I don't know what he did, but that's my recollection. We want to talk about flatulence at age 16 on a yearbook page. I'm game.
Okay, so now we know what that means. I asked my guys, because, they're younger than me, whether or not they had ever heard this term, and they both said yes. And then they were sort of hesitant to relay it to me. And then all of a sudden they realized, oh, it's Randi. You know what I mean? You could tell her anything. So apparently that refers to shoving things up your butt to get high. What? And so I asked them, why would you do that? And they said, well, like if you were going to a concert or something like that and you wanted to get really high, but you didn't want to bring the beer in, or you weren't able to bring the pot or the drug, whatever it was, in because they were going to look in your bag or whatever. So you stick this stuff, whatever you're into, up your butt, and you get high that way. Your body absorbs that way. And I said, well, why wouldn't you, if it was a drug, put it under your tongue? I don't know, but that's what people do. they shove it up their butt. So that's what that particularly refers to. And he says it has to do with flatulence. Okay.
You mentioned, I think, the Renata, I don't know how you pronounce that. That's the proper name of an individual, you know?
Renata.
Renata? It's spelled with an E at the end, R-E-N-A-T-E. Is that
correct?
Okay. And then after that is the word alumnius. What does the word alumnius mean in that context?
I explained that in my opening statement. She was a great friend of ours. A bunch of us went to dances with her. She hung out with us as a group. The media circus that has been generated by this thought and reported that it referred to sex. It did not. Never had any, as she herself said on the record, any kind of sexual interaction with her. And I'm sorry how that's been misinterpreted, and sorry about that, as I explained in my opening statement, because she's a good person. And to have her name dragged through this hearing is a joke.
Everything's a joke.
And really an embarrassment.
Devil's Triangle?
Drinking game.
How's it played?
3 glasses in a triangle.
Okay, the Devil's Triangle, as I told you earlier. I mean, that's 2 men and a woman, is what that is. It's a threesome, but it specifically refers to 2 guys and 1 girl. It's a drinking game.
And?
You ever played quarters?
No.
Okay, it's a quarters game.
Oh my God, he's such a liar. It's not a quarters game, all right? It's 2 men and a woman.
Ann Doherty's?
As you can tell from my calendar, she had a party on the 4th of July in the beach in Delaware.
And there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 F's in front of the 4th of July. What does that signify, if anything?
One of our friends, Squee, when he said the F word, starting at a young age, had kind of a wind-up to the F word. Kind of a and then the word would come out.
So you do know that this is how Kavanaugh knows Dr. Ford, Christine Blasey Ford, because she was dating Squee. And Squee, obviously, is his friend for a very, 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 very long time. So that's how he knows her.
And when we were 15, we thought that was funny, and it became an inside joke for how he would say, and I won't repeat it here, for the F word.
Referring to Georgetown versus Louisville and...
You want to name more on the Fs?
No, Orioles versus Red Sox. In both, you respond, who won anyway, or who won that game anyway? Should we draw any conclusion that a loss of recollection associated with alcohol was involved in you not knowing who won the games that you attended?
No. First of all, the Georgetown-Louisville was watching it on TV, a party, and
That's not inconsistent with drinking and not remembering what happened.
I'm aware. And the point of both was we, in essence, were having a party and didn't pay attention to the game, even though the game was the excuse we had for getting together. I think that's very common. I don't know if you've been to a Super Bowl party, for example, Senator, and not paid attention to the game and just hung out with your friends. I don't know if you've done that or not, but that's what we were referring to.
Yeah, that does happen, but there's always beer involved. Just saying. Have you ever had a Super Bowl party where there wasn't beer? Have you ever had a game party where you invited your friends over and you didn't offer them beer and snacks and all that? What the hell? Oh, no, we just got together over a game and there was no drinking. We were just laughing so much that we forgot to. That's what I'm talking about. Lies big and small. Those are the small ones. Those are the small ones. You want to hear the big ones? These are some of the big ones, okay? It begins in 2004 with Orrin Hatch asking him about Orrin Hatch's own staffer. Manny Miranda was an attorney that worked on Orrin Hatch's staff. And he, for 18 months, was stealing Democrats on the Judiciary Committee's emails.
Did Mr. Miranda ever share, reference, or provide you with any documents that appeared to you to have been drafted or prepared by Democratic staff members of the Senate Judiciary Committee?
No, I was not aware of that matter ever until I learned of it in the
media late last year.
Did Mr. Miranda ever share, reference, or provide you with information that you believe or were led to believe was obtained or derived from Democratic files?
No. Again, I was not aware of that matter in any way whatsoever until I learned it in the media.
Do you know if any other associate White House counsels had access to these type of materials that were improperly taken?
I don't know of anyone who was aware of this matter, again, until the media reports late last year.
But you were not?
I was not aware of it.
Okay.
Okay. Fast forward.
You had the full text of my letter in your inbox before anything had been said about it publicly. Did you find it at all unusual to receive a draft letter from Democratic senators to each other before any mention of it was made public?
Well, the only thing I said on the email exchange, if I'm looking at it correctly, Senator, was who signed this, which would imply that I thought it was a signed letter.
It was sent to you. Were you surprised to get it? I mean, it's obviously a draft. It's got typos and everything else. Were you surprised the draft letter circulated among Democrats ended up
in your inbox?
But
from Mr. Miranda.
I think the premise of your question is not accurately describing my apparent recollection or understanding of the time, because I wouldn't have said who signed this if I thought it was a draft. And my email says who signed this.
So you didn't realize what you had was a stolen letter signed by me, that you had a letter that had not been sent to anybody, had not been made public?
Well, all I see that I said was who signed this.
Oh, he's such a putz, man. Can you just say what it is? He's an entitled little prick. That's what this guy is. He gets caught lying, and then he just says, well, all I did was, he was asked in 2004. He was asked in 2006. Did you ever see these emails? Did you ever receive anything from Manny Miranda? No, I only know about it because I read it in the media. Well, the same thing is happening with the Ramirez texts, okay? Kavanaugh said he first heard about Ramirez's allegations in the New Yorker story published on September 23rd. And now we have two women who, one is a law partner at Aiken Gump. That is a huge position, okay? And the texts between this woman and there's two. The bride at the wedding is Karen Yarosavage, and Ms. Burcham is the partner at Aiken Gump. And both of those women are friends of Kavanaugh, and they have tried to reach the FBI, and they say that while he testified that he believes that Ramirez was running around talking to all the classmates at Yale, trying to get her story together, the opposite is actually true. That Brett Kavanaugh was actually personally talking with former classmates about Ramirez's story in advance of it becoming publicly known in the media, in the New Yorker article. That is the article that made Deborah Ramirez's allegation public. In one of the text messages, the bride at this wedding, Yara Savage, and also a Yale classmate, said that Kavanaugh asked her to go on the record in his defense. Two other messages show communication between Kavanaugh's team and former classmates in advance of the story. In a series of texts before the publication of the New Yorker story, meaning prior to September 23rd, Yara Savage writes that she had been in contact with, quote, Brett's guy, and also with Brett, who wants her to go on the record to refute Ramirez. This is before Deborah Ramirez went public with the story about the soccer team party at Lawrence Hall, where a plastic penis was whipped out, and then a real one was whipped out, and then she recalls Brett Kavanaugh pulling up his pants. How did he know she was going to say that before she said that if he didn't do it? Now, over here are the transcripts of the investigation that the Senate staffers do with nominees. This one in particular is the Ramirez investigation. You know what they do? The reason why I want to show it to you, you can find it on the Senate Judiciary Committee's website, the transcripts you can. Go to the majorities. Not the minority. Go to the majority because they separate even that way. But you'll see that what they do is staffers call him on the phone and they ask him questions like, do you know Debbie Ramirez? And do you remember this party? He says no. And they go, okay, thank you, Judge. That is the extent of the investigation. But why do they do it? So he knows what to practice.
Randy, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. I do not believe that heavy drinking or even loudish behavior of an 18 or even 21-year-old should condemn a person for the rest of his life. I would be a hypocrite to think so. However, I have direct, repeated knowledge about Brett's drinking and his disposition while drunk. And I do believe that Brett's actions as a 53-year-old federal judge matter.
Well, they do.
If he lied about his past actions on national television, and more especially while speaking under oath in front of the United States Senate, I believe those lies should have consequences. It is truth that is at stake, and I believe that the ability to speak the truth, even when it does not reflect well upon oneself, is a paramount quality we seek in our nation's most powerful judges. I can unequivocally say that in denying the possibility that he ever blacked out from drinking, and in downplaying the degree and frequency of his drinking, Brett has not told the truth. I felt it was my civic duty to tell of my experience while drinking with Brett, and I offer this statement to the press. I have no desire to speak further publicly and nothing more to say to the press at this time. I will, however, take my information to the FBI, and on that note, I contacted the FBI, contacted me this morning, I contacted them, I've received the form, I filled it out with the details, but I can't give those to anybody right now.
Okay, so that is the Chad Luttenberg, what's his name? It's a very white bread name. That's all I can say. Ludington, yes. Chad Ludington. Anyway, that he is a drinking buddy of Brett Kavanaugh's from Yale. And, his reaction is the same as mine. I read this to you yesterday. That was in the New York Times. That was his editorial that he wrote that Brett Kavanaugh is lying about, things big and small. Obviously, this man cannot tell the truth. He's incapable of telling the truth. He's so Trumpian that it's no wonder that Trump picked him. He's like a mini Trump. I mean, the guy just lies. He lies about everything, things that matter, things that don't matter. He has lied to the Senate, like I said, since 2004. He claimed that he had nothing to do with the nomination of Judge William Pryor. And Judge William Pryor was one of the most anti-abortion, anti-LGBT justices that you'd seen in modern history. And he said that's not one that I worked on personally. But there are new emails that were released, and they clearly show that Brett Kavanaugh was not just involved in the confirmation or the attempt to confirm William Pryor, but that he selected William Pryor, that he interviewed William Pryor, and that he worked very, very hard to shepherd him through a confirmation hearing. Then in 2006, he also was responsible for the nomination of Judge Pickering. Judge Pickering had moved to reduce the sentencing of a man who burned a cross in front of an interracial couple's house. So Brett Kavanaugh had to, do a lot of work to make Pickering look normal. Pickering was from Mississippi, and he was a world heavyweight champion racist. He said he didn't work on Pickering. Emails released this year show that Kavanaugh not only prepared documents on Pickering, but he drafted opinion pieces and put them in newspapers in support of Pickering. In 2006, he shepherded another nominee named William Haynes. He said he did nothing to help William Haynes, but the recent emails revealed that he played a large role in the nomination of William Haynes, including telling the Republicans in the Senate that, quote, Haynes would be an across-the-board judicial conservative. In 2004, we keep playing you the stolen emails exchange between Orrin Hatch, whose own staffer, Manny Mirandez, is the person who was stealing the Democrats' documents about judicial nominees. They were the Judiciary Committee, and they were, drafting documents to each other, the Democrats were, with their concerns about these various nominees. The problems with them. This one's a racist, and that one is so anti-abortion. This one takes money from the Texans for Life. Why is this judge receiving all this cash? What's going on with Priscilla Owen? Okay, the stolen emails were being provided to him in his email by Manny Miranda. Except 2004, the Democrats didn't have the emails. 2006, Ted Kennedy asked him again, now that you know the emails were taken. He didn't even use the word stolen. He used the word taken. He said, oh, well, he said, would you have done anything differently on these nominations? And he said, oh, well, your question contains a false premise. You're assuming that I saw them. I never saw them. I never saw. And Kennedy repeats it with his Massachusetts accent. He said, oh, you never saw them? And he says, no, I never saw them. And then Leahy is able to produce the emails that clearly show that Manny Miranda was writing to Brett Kavanaugh. Not just this one email, not just two, not just three, but meetings at the House. And I'll give you the documents and blah, blah, blah. Okay? And he claims, quote, I was not aware of the matter ever until I learned about it in the media. The emails clearly show that Kavanaugh received stolen information, memos written by Senator Patrick Leahy between Democrats, only Democrats, and they were marked, hold this in the strictest confidence. One was marked Intel. The other one was, hey, meet me at this apartment and I'll give you the documents. I don't want to send them through email anymore. It defies logic. It defies logic. He's presented with evidence and he goes, well, all I said was who signed this. In 2004, there was a written questionnaire. And he was asked about these emails in this written questionnaire. And he wrote, these meetings, calls, and emails were typical of how judicial confirmations have been handled in the past. The fact checker at the Washington Post, Glenn Kessler, did an entire fact check on this, okay? And he said that these were not typical of past administration. This is not accurate. It's not normal. In 2006, he again denied knowing that, these emails were stolen. In 2018, he denied knowing that he received documents that were stolen. He said just, the usual kind of things that would happen. This was these were normal things, normal discussions.
Did Mr. Miranda send you an email asking you why the Leahy people were looking into her financial ties?
It's Priscilla Owens.
Is that what this email is?
I'm just asking you.
Well, can I take a minute to read it?
Of course.
Okay.
That is the face of a man who just got
This is
caught.
it was 4 days before her hearing on July 23rd.
From Manny Miranda at judiciary.senate.gov to Brett M. Kavanaugh.
Did I send any of the emails on this chain? I don't think so.
Oh, my God. He's so smarmy.
I think I'm CC'd. In any event, if he said, why are the Leahy people looking into this? From Manny Miranda. I don't really have a specific recollection of any of this, Senator, but it would not have been at all unusual for, and this happens all the time, I think, which is the Leahy people are looking into this and the Hatch people are looking into that. I think.
You say all the time, 2 days before the hearing, he told you that the Democrats were passing around a related 60 Minutes story, and he said his intelligence suggests that Leahy will focus on all things money. Well, That appears to come from a stolen email to me, stolen by the Republican staff member sent to me the night before.
Right. So he gets caught there. During his confirmation to the D.C. Circuit in 2006, they were asking him about enemy combatants. Remember, and the enemy combatants' right to an attorney. Did they have a right to an attorney? And he said, quote, he testified, "I was not involved. I am not involved in the questions about the rules governing detention of combatants." In 2007, Kavanaugh, in fact, evidence came forward that he, in fact, counseled the White House lawyers regarding the Bush administration's decision to deny lawyers to enemy combatants. There are now at least 3 recorded examples of Kavanaugh participating in discussions surrounding detainee policy. In 2006, he was asked under oath about his work on the warrantless wiretapping program. Now, that is a famous wiretapping program. Why? Because that is when we first learned who James Comey was. John Ashcroft was the attorney general, and John Ashcroft had pancreatitis, and John Ashcroft had to undergo surgery, and John Ashcroft needed to sign off on a warrantless wiretapping program, and he would not do it. He felt it was unconstitutional and violated the Fourth Amendment. And so the Republicans, the lawyers in the White House, including Kavanaugh, waited until Ashcroft was medicated with various pain medications post-surgery. And they then went to his hospital room and they wanted him to sign off on this warrantless wiretapping program. James Comey got a phone call from I believe it was from Ashcroft's wife, saying, because Comey was then acting director, and because Ashcroft had temporarily released control because he'd be under, narcotics. And I believe it was Ashcroft's wife called Comey and said, "You have to get here. The lawyers from the White House are here and they're trying to get my husband to sign off on an illegal program, something he does not believe is legal. And we don't want this to, become law over his signature." And Comey went to the hospital and stopped it. And that's the first time we ever knew the name James Comey. Well, Kavanaugh was part of that group of lawyers in the White House. He, under oath, in 2006, denied involvement in the Bush-era surveillance program. He said he didn't know about it again until he read about it in the New York Times. Newly released email shows that Brett Kavanaugh asked the Justice Department about the constitutionality of random, constant surveillance of phone and email conversations of non-citizens who are in the United States with the purpose of surveillance to prevent terrorist criminal violence. Quote, that is his own email. That is a quoted, but he denied that he knew about the program until he read about the program in the New York Times. And the way we all found out about that program was in the New York Times. But he knew about it because he had a prior email asking whether or not this was constitutional. But he said he didn't know. He's lying. Then he claimed that his previous testimony about work in the Bush White House was 100% accurate. Patrick Leahy detailed, quote, "There is evidence that Mr. Miranda provided you with materials that were stolen from me." I just played you that. He went on to say, this contradicts your prior testimony. It's also clear from public emails, and I'm refraining from going into the non-public ones, that you had reason to believe materials were obtained inappropriately at the time. So he lied there. He's also testified previously that he would follow Roe v. Wade, faithfully, and that, but obviously he ruled to deny a woman the right to get an abortion and had absolutely no legal reason for doing it except to delay it to the point where she needed a hospitalization because it was now the second trimester. And then, sexual assault, all the rest, right? Everything that, I focused on academics, sports, church. I went to Little Flower, church services. His own calendar shows there were so many freaking parties. Go to Timmy's for skis. I mean, there were so many parties. There were so many. His yearbook obviously, paints him as a partier. And his friends actually remember him as a partier. He categorically stated he never attended gatherings like the one Dr. Ford described. His calendars don't show weekday parties. Well, his calendars do show weekday parties. He said none of the gatherings included the list of people that Dr. Ford has identified. Then we find a July 1st entry in the calendar. The exact same people that Dr. Blasey Ford remembers were at a gathering. Listen, and then you get into, texting about Ramirez's allegations before Ramirez goes public. And he's contacting, his fellow classmates at Yale who are trying to say to the FBI, okay, this is stinky. I'm not drawing any conclusions, but I want to give you this information that before her story became public, he knew about it. And they won't take it from her.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Yeah, we certainly want the FBI to do a real investigation, and we are working to make sure that happens. I've had discussions, many yesterday, with my colleagues, with the White House counsel's office. My staff is following up as well. I had one of those conversations just 5 minutes ago to make sure that any current credible allegation that has been made is fully investigated.
And will you continue to say you'll vote no if the FBI investigation is not to your liking?
Well, we will certainly in the next couple of days be having dialogue with the White House counsel's office, making sure that it is up to standard. It does no good to have an investigation that just gives us more cover, for example. We actually need to find out what we can find out. And we have to realize that we may not be able to find out everything that happened. This is something that was a while ago. Some witnesses or potential witnesses may not want to cooperate. But for those that can and those who we can compel to cooperate, we've got to do a fulsome investigation.
Fulsome. That's Senator Jeff Flake, who was accosted by two sexual assault survivors in the elevator. And it appears that between those two women who were so powerful in saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You're going to put a man who violated a young girl on the Supreme Court, and my daughters are going to have to live in the next for the next 50 years with this? What are you doing, sir?" That was so uniquely impactful. It was so honest and raw, and it must have, done a little something to Senator Jeff Flake's here now, gone tomorrow conscience, because he then joined the crowd saying, no, we need to do an FBI investigation, and I'll vote him out of committee, but I won't vote for him on the floor until a complete and fulsome investigation has occurred. So how does that square with what I played you earlier, that Mitch McConnell is planning to move to end debate on the nomination by tomorrow so that they can have a vote on Friday? How does that square with Jeff Flake saying it has to be a real investigation, not just one that gives us cover? Susan Collins says she wants Miss Julie Swetnick included in the FBI's investigation. Same thing for Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. She says she wants Julie Swetnick included in the investigation. And Jeff Flake, he couched it by saying, Well, whatever is current and credible. I don't know if he believes Swetnick. I don't know who does and who doesn't in this audience, but she sat for an interview yesterday. Now, I just posted it, and people said, oh, what, you did no research before you posted it? I posted the whole interview. Not pieces of it. I posted the whole damn thing, 13 minutes, so everybody could see what she had to say.
So you only thought about coming forward when you learned about Dr. Ford?
Yes, because I did not know how close Brett Kavanaugh was to possibly becoming the next Supreme Court justice.
I just want to get the timeline right about this because he was nominated in July. Christine Ford, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford came forward in the Washington Post more recently in September. So was it in September that you
It's been several weeks, but I'm not somebody who follows the news. I'm not political at all.
Julie Swetnick says she was in community college when she started attending house parties that included high schoolers. You graduated in 1980.
Correct.
From high school.
Correct.
From Gaithersburg Public High School. So you would have been out of high school. So a lot of people have wondered, what are you doing at a high school party if you're already
It wasn't a high school party. These parties had everybody between about an age range of 15, 16 to 25, maybe even more.
How did you meet Brett Kavanaugh? Did you actually meet him?
I did actually meet him. I remember meeting him because I remember he's got a very distinctive face, and as does Mark Judge. And I remember specifically meeting him, being introduced to him.
Did you know anything about Brett Kavanaugh?
No. I believe he might have been wearing a Georgetown Prep uniform, which a lot of the boys used to wear at least a uniform or parts of their uniform.
At the party?
Sometimes. Yeah. I think they were very proud.
In your statement to the Judiciary Committee, you described a range of behavior. And you say you saw Brett Kavanaugh do these things. Can you describe to me what you saw him do?
He was very aggressive, very sloppy drunk, very mean drunk. I saw him go up to girls and paw on them, try to, get a little too handsy, touching them in private parts. I saw him try to shift clothing.
Later in the interview, she went further.
I saw him push girls against walls. He would pretend to stumble and stumble into them and knock them into a wall. He'd push his body against theirs. He would grope them.
There are some differences between Swetnick's sworn statement last week and what she told us. In that statement, Swetnick said she became aware of efforts by Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge to spike punch at parties. In our interview, she said she saw them near the punch, but did not specifically say she saw either man spike it. Did you see Brett Kavanaugh, spiking the punch, putting grain alcohol in the punch?
I saw him giving red Solo cups to quite a few girls during that time frame, and there was grain punch at those parties. And I would not take one of those glasses from Brett Kavanaugh, excuse me. I saw him around the punch, I won't say bowls, or the punch containers. I don't know what he did, but I saw him buy them, yes.
In her declaration, Swetnick also wrote, I also witnessed efforts by Mark Judge, Brett Kavanaugh, and others to cause girls to become inebriated and disoriented so they could then be gang raped in a side room or bedroom by a train of numerous boys. I have a firm recollection of seeing boys lined up outside rooms at many of these parties, waiting for their turn with a girl inside the room. These boys included Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh. What did you see?
I was very innocent. Well, until what happened to me, I didn't put two and two together. But I would see boys standing outside of rooms, congregated together, sort of like a gauntlet. And I didn't know what was occurring. But I would see them laughing, a lot of laughing.
Standing in line outside a room?
They would, not line, but definitely huddled by doors. And I didn't understand what it could possibly be.
So there is no discrepancy as far as I can hear. She said she became aware of them spiking the punch. She never said I witnessed it. She never said she saw it. She said she became aware of spiking punch. She said she didn't know what was going on in those side rooms until she was pushed into a side room and something happened to her. Now, you got people that are saying she's a child, she enabled child rape. Swear to God. There's this guy named Dallas Woodhouse, who is an executive in the North Carolina Grand Old Perverts Party, okay? The GOP, who said she needs to go to jail because she went to these parties where children were being raped, and she knew it. She did not know what was going on. And you know what this really sounds like? And I got to tell you, when I was 13, 14 years old, I swear to God, this is true. When I was 13 or 14 years old, I didn't graduate high school. You want to know why I didn't graduate high school? Because I hung out with the college boys. And the college boys went to college and had these college parties. And at 13 and 14 years old, I went to those parties. So there were 20-year-olds at those parties. There were 18-year-olds at those parties. There were 21-year-olds at these parties. And I was only 13 or 14 years old. And the reason why I went to these parties is because I was dating the same guy. I dated him for 10 years, but he was older than me. When I was 13, he was 17. And I'll never forget his mother. God rest her soul. She's dead now. She just died like last year. And we've kept in touch all these years. And she told him in front of me, don't you ever go all the way with her because that's got a name that's called statutory rape. And we believed her. And we fooled around, but we didn't go all the way. But I did go to those parties. And there were rooms like that where guys were standing outside a door because there were quaaludes at the party, because there was alcohol at the party. And the older girls were probably in those rooms with the older boys. We were warned not to go in those rooms. We were warned not to do these things, so we didn't do them. But I was only 13 or 14 years old. And I went to those parties. In fact, when I was in 10th grade, I didn't go to school anymore. I stopped going to school like every day, probably in 9th grade. Just stopped going. I cut school every single day, every day. And we would go to Jamaica, Queens, which is where Donald Trump's, family lived. But there's two sides of the tracks. I'd go to the other side of the track. We'd go there. We'd hang out at the record store. We'd go there. We'd go to the diner. We'd eat breakfast at Lolly's and not go to first period or second period or third period. And by the time it was fourth period, the whole day's gone. We'll go to Ramona's and we'll watch I Love Lucy on Channel 5 because they would rerun I Love Lucy one after the other, okay? And we just didn't go to school. And then I started dating Michael, and Michael was going to Brooklyn College. I lived in Queens. He could drive. I couldn't, so he'd come to me. We'd go to these parties, and then finally he transferred to state school. He transferred to New York, Stony Brook. And Stony Brook was way, way out on Long Island. I mean, like the last exit on the Long Island Expressway. It was like exit 62. And that's as far as the Long Island Expressway used to go. And so I got tired of going back and forth to see him, so I just moved in to his dorm. Yeah, great. I just moved into his dorm. Where were my parents? They were getting divorced. And my house, there was my dad had gone, and he was the disciplinarian. My mother was heartbroken. It was just a horrible time, right? So I moved out to Stony Brook, and out there was nothing but quaalude parties. In fact, to this day, I can't listen to Jefferson Starship's Miracle without thinking about quaaludes. And all this was going on, but I was so young, and Michael was a good guy, and he protected me, and he knew where I should not go, which rooms I shouldn't go near, which, stay here, or let's go for a walk, or let's, believe me, these things happened. They happened. And so everybody's saying, well, she graduated already. Believe me, there were young kids, there were kids my age, all the way up to 25 years old at these parties. And quaaludes were the drug of choice, and they made you very slowly, your fingers would tingle, Then it would crawl up your arm, and all of a sudden you'd actually see, it's coming on, it's coming on. We wore T-shirts that said "Better Living Through Chemistry." It had little Speedy Alka-Seltzer, that character on them, and and had Roar 714, drawings of these pills. This was the culture. This is what it was. And that is what she is talking about. And she is saying she became aware that they were spiking this grain alcohol punch with Quaaludes. And then taking girls into the rooms. That is what she's talking about. Oh!
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
Here's some more of Julie Swetnick's interview.
What happened to me is probably the most horrendous, awful thing that could happen to any human being. My body was violated. My soul was broken. I was not able to have somebody stop when I said, no, stop. I felt like somebody took me and basically said, you're worthless. You are nothing to us. You are disposable. I was at a party, and I remember that I started not to feel very well. And next thing I know, I was shoved into a room, and I'm having my clothes torn in different directions. I was touched everywhere. I was physically assaulted in every way you could possibly physically assault a woman. It was horrible. I had no way to fend them off.
You know what I'm going to ask. Everyone is wondering if one of those people was Brett Kavanaugh.
I cannot specifically say that he was one of the ones who assaulted me, but before this happened to me at that party, I saw Brett Kavanaugh there, I saw Mark Judge there, and they were hanging about the area where I started to feel disoriented, and where the room was, and where the other boys were hanging out and laughing. I could hear them laughing and laughing. And it's very hard for me to talk about this, but it's important that somebody says something, because if Brett Kavanaugh was one of those people that did this to me, there is no way in the world that he should go scot-free on this and that he should be on the Supreme Court. He just, it's just unthinkable to me. If he does, there's no justice in the world.
And that's the problem. That's the problem, is he's never copped to the fact that he was even at parties like this. And we all know, because we're all from that same generation, that there were parties like this, college parties like this. By the time I went out to Stony Brook, I should tell you, by the time I moved out there, I was almost 16 years old. I mean, like I said, I was about 15 years old when we moved out there. The first 2 years, Michael went to Brooklyn College, and then the second 2 years, we were out at Stony Brook. So by that time, I started partying too. I've taken Quaaludes. I know what they are. I know what they do. I've talked to you about them. They were what we used to call the ultimate aphrodisiac. And if you were with your boyfriend and it was consensual and it was something that you agreed to, hey, whatever happened to Quaaludes? But if you weren't consenting and all of a sudden somebody put a drug like that in your drink, and you start to feel disoriented, just like, Deborah Ramirez tells the same story. All of a sudden, she becomes foggy. All of a sudden, she gets disoriented, and someone pushes her into a bedroom. She tells the same kind of a story. All of a sudden, she feels disoriented, and someone takes her into a bedroom, and they start pulling at her and ripping at her. That's because everyone becomes like a sexual animal on these drugs. But if you still say no, if that's your position, then no means no. And I didn't know any guy in my circle that would have said no means yes. None of my friends would have done something like that, or at least I'm not aware of any girl that ever said no and had somebody do this to her, back at those parties. But this is what that drug did. And to have it slipped into your drink and not know what the hell, that it's coming on, here it comes, because it's powerful. And it lasts for hours. Hours. Who would make up a story like this? Really, who would? And then they try to denigrate her by saying, well, everyone did you tell anybody? She said, yes, I went to the police. I told my mother. Okay. She did one better than me because I didn't tell my mother what was going on out there. I didn't tell anybody anything. But she did.
After what you describe as this attack on you and a rape, did you tell anyone?
Oh, yes. I contacted the Montgomery County Police.
You did?
And I told my mother, and she cried with me. She held me the next day. I was so distraught. She wanted me to go to the police immediately. She was just outraged. She was so hurt for me.
Do you remember who you spoke to?
I vaguely remember people, but I'm not quite sure, not 100%.
Swetnick's mother has since passed away. Swetnick also named one of the officers she said she spoke with. That officer is now deceased. NBC News verified he worked for the Montgomery County Police at that time. We have requested copies of any records, but Montgomery County Police officials said today it could take up to a month for them to respond.
Okay, so this is how we'll know. Right there. There's a piece of evidence. The FBI ought to be interested in it. But they are announcing now that they could be done with the FBI investigation as soon as today. And they have not spoken to her. And they haven't spoken to Richard O., a Yale classmate, who told The New Yorker that he overheard a female student telling another student about an incident similar to what happened to Miss Ramirez when it happened. James Roach, who was Kavanaugh's roommate when this thing happened with Miss Ramirez, he's not been spoken to. And he said, although Brett was normally reserved, he was notably a heavy drinker, even by the standards of our time. I'm telling you, to say that, knowing what went on in our time, that this person was a real throwdown partier, that's saying a lot. A lot. They didn't talk to him. They didn't talk to, Timmy Gaudette, whose house this apparently happened in. They didn't talk to Squee, who was apparently the person that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was dating at the time and introduced her to Brett Kavanaugh. They didn't talk to Dr. Christine Blasey's husband. They haven't talked to the 65 women, some of whom who have recanted their endorsement of Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, there's so many people to talk to. The Democrats gave a list of 25 people. This woman here and Dr. Ramirez, Deborah Ramirez, she gave a list of 20 people to the FBI who could corroborate her story. They didn't talk to any of them. They say that they could be done as soon as today. As soon as today. And where does this magical report go, by the way? It goes to the White House. It goes to Don McGahn. Don McGahn, who sat behind Kavanaugh throughout this entire process. Don McGahn, who picked Kavanaugh, who shepherded Kavanaugh, who also picked his wife's friends, who had never tried a case, who had never taken a deposition by themselves, who had never even been in a courtroom. They were all nominated for confirmable judgeships. Remember that? And Senator John Kennedy had to say, have you ever tried a case? Have you ever taken a deposition by yourself? No. Okay. This is who Don McGahn is putting up for the judiciary. These are the types of people he is putting up for big jobs on district courts and appeals courts and now the Supreme Court. McGahn sat behind Kavanaugh. McGahn knows all the opposition research. McGahn knows exactly what was likely to come out about Kavanaugh. He knows. McGahn is who the report goes to, the FBI report. And then the White House sends it over to the Senate, and it is not made public. If it's made public, it will only be because the Democrats get some help from Senator Jeff Flake, Senator Susan Collins, Senator Lisa Murkowski. Without their help, we will never see this FBI report. And it's not a conclusory report. It's just going to be statements that they took. That's it. Now, this reminds me so much of what the House Intelligence Committee did with their interviews in the Russia investigation. You know, you had Roger Stone come in and they'd say, did you talk to WikiLeaks? And he would say, no, I didn't. They'd say, thank you very much. Same thing happened with Brett Kavanaugh. Did you know Miss Blasey Ford? No, I didn't know her. Thank you very much. Did you know Debbie Ramirez? Yeah, I knew her. We were friendly, but not friends. Thank you very much. Did anything like what she says happen? No. Thank you very much. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the extent of what has happened here. And this woman just gave you a very researchable, very checkable, very reliable piece of evidence. She said she went to the police. She said she made a police report. Montgomery County says they won't be able to confirm whether or not she did for 30 days. They're going to end this investigation today. How is that possible? How is it possible that they would end the investigation today knowing that she just said that she went to the police and that Montgomery County says they need 30 days to figure out whether or not a police report was made? How is that possible? Before anybody has spoken to her, before the FBI has contacted her, before we know whether or not Montgomery County has a record of her going to the police with this particular rape, they have called her a liar. Some of you have called her a liar.
I'm critical of the puppet masters. And the puppet masters are Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, and the Republican leadership on the Senate Judiciary Committee. They're pulling the strings. They're telling the FBI what to do.
The Senate has a lot of sway here because technically they are in charge of this, right? This is this muddled system that we have here now because of the timing in part where the White House is going back to the FBI to check things, but really it's the Senate Judiciary that's supposed to do the digging. If Grassley et al. Make the determination, we've looked at these. We looked at Swetnick. I don't find her credible. The former litigation, she changes her story. She never says Kavanaugh did anything to her. She says she heard him do other things on TV. She says, well, after the fact, I realized that the lines of boys, that's what it was about. She says she contacted the police, but no police report.
Well, we don't know if there's a police report yet.
They said it'll take a month to find out.
She stated in the interview that she reported it to the police around the time that it happened.
A policeman that she knew or something like that?
No. She just went down to the precinct and reported it to someone at the precinct.
How could a report like this be filed? Legitimate question. And they didn't do anything about it.
Oh, well, please.
I don't know. I have no idea. I have the same question. But look, let me say this.
Seems unlikely. Well, the cop is dead now that she's supposedly
I don't know. We're
to,
talking
right?
about a different time period, Chris. We're talking about 35 years ago. And 35 years ago, things were handled slightly differently.
No, I hear you, but the policeman she says she has the name of, he's deceased. She says she told her mom's deceased. In the court of public opinion, people will say, is it convenient that everyone she says she talked to isn't here anymore?
It's not convenient because many, many years ago, she confided in other witnesses that this had happened.
Right.
And we have these witnesses, and we're prepared to present them to the FBI so that the FBI can go out and interview these witnesses. But I want to go back to something you said, okay? Days ago, a week ago, the Republican leadership on the Senate Judiciary Committee came out immediately after these allegations surfaced and said my client was a liar. Immediately, without any investigation, without any fact determination, without hearing from my client, without asking her to testify, without any of this. How would they know, Chris? If this was about a search for the truth, they wouldn't be so quick to criticize my client and call her a liar.
It was your attachment that I think pricked their purpose a little bit, right?
But how do they,
Several of the senators and the president named you.
How do they know? I mean, when we made the allegations, guess what? I had done significant due diligence in connection with this before we made the allegations. What had they done before they called her a liar?
Nothing. And if you think that going to the authorities, whoever they were at the time, was going to get you some sort of investigation, if you said you were at a party and people were eating Quaaludes and you were drinking and then something bad happened to you, they would tell you to go home. Go tell your parents. Go tell you. Stay away from. They didn't. You know, to this day, 99% of rapists get away with it today. Yeah. 99% of rapists get away with it. 99%. And these freaking Republicans have the nerve today to stand up and say, I'm worried about our sons, not our daughters. I'm worried about our sons. Because if these women can come back 35 years later and they could say something, they don't get to just say something. Even back then in real time, you had to prove it, that you weren't asking for it.
It's the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Did you see Brett Kavanaugh, spiking the punch, putting green alcohol in the punch?
I saw him giving red Solo cups to quite a few girls during that time frame, and there was green punch at those parties. And I would not take one of those glasses from Brett Kavanaugh, excuse me. I saw him around the punch, I won't say bowls, or the punch containers. I don't know what he did, but I saw him buy them, yes.
Now, the sworn statement, let's put up just so that we remind people, obviously you know. I became aware of efforts by Mark Judge, Brett Kavanaugh, and others to spike the punch at house parties that I attended. We'll leave it there.
Yep.
Now, I argue those are different.
Can I explain that? Yeah, can I explain that?
But I argue that they're different.
Okay.
Right,
well, what her testimony stated and the declaration, I understand you argue it's different. One of her friends informed her of what she just put in the declaration or what was attested to in the declaration. And last night at 10:40 p.m., I had a telephone conversation with a woman who will go unnamed, who lives in Florida, who told me directly that Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh would spike the punch with grain alcohol and Quaaludes.
She knows it because she's seen it, or she heard it?
She knows it because she saw it, and it's about the 5th conversation that I've had with her in the last 2
to the
weeks.
FBI?
100%, and this is what we
So
keep
she's
saying.
nameless for us, but she would give her name.
Yes, because she doesn't want to be outed publicly. She is prepared to speak to the FBI. And Chris, this is what I keep coming back to, okay? We're not talking about a lot of resources to interview my client, the woman in Florida, and other witnesses that I'm aware of.
No, we're not talking about a lot of resources to interview Miss Swetnick and to interview some of the friends that she says told her that they saw Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge putting Quaaludes into grain alcohol punch and handing these cups to women. See, that's how she became aware. She didn't say she saw it herself. But there are other witnesses who did, and the FBI will not talk to any of them. And that's why Kavanaugh gets away with being an entitled little prick, because no one in his elite, what you talk about drain the swamp, these are the most elite Washington people that you could possibly ever think of. Kavanaugh. And that crowd. Are you kidding me? Drain the swamp. Oh, the establishment, the Washington elite. Well, who is more elite than Brett Kavanaugh, whose father was a lobbyist, whose mother was a judge, whose grandpa went to Yale, and then he's a legacy and he goes to Yale, and then he becomes, degenerate at college and parties all the way through, just like W did. W was like, snorting cocaine the whole time he was in college, and he was an alcoholic, and he got a DUI when he was 30. But everybody covers for everybody in that elite swamp. This is just so disgusting. And, you try and speak up. You try and say. You try and tell. You got friends of his who are saying, he contacted me about the Ramirez allegation before it was public, asking me to vouch for him. And I'm not drawing any conclusion about his guilt or innocence, but I am trying to show the FBI that he knew what he did before she told anybody in the press what he did. How early did he know? When did he know? Probably when he did it. I mean, this is crazy. And they're going to end the investigation today. They talked to 4 people. The blackout drug addict, alcoholic by his own admission, Mark Judge, who's a recovering alcoholic who's been hiding out in a beach house in Bethany Beach, 3 hours away from where he lives, this whole time. He doesn't recall. Well, I don't expect that he remembers even being in college. They didn't talk to Dr. Ford. They didn't talk to Dr. Ford's husband. They didn't talk to the 20 witnesses that Ramirez says she named to the FBI. They didn't talk to Julie Swetnick. They didn't talk to Julie Swetnick's friends who said that they were eyewitnesses to Brett Kavanaugh's spiking punch with Quaaludes, for God's sake. I mean, this is so... And everyone that grew up back then, everybody that was, at college then, like I always say, I didn't go to college, but you know what? I lived in a dorm, and then we moved to an apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment, and we shared it with, two other couples. Everybody knows what went on. Everybody knows what the drug of choice was. Everybody knows what those parties were like. I mean, it's unbelievable to me. All of a sudden, this didn't happen. Are you kidding me? Of course it happened. And he's lying about it. If he would just say, yes, it happened. I didn't realize that I was violating people because we were so high, and I'm so sorry. I'd like to apologize to anybody whose hands, who I put my hands on. When I didn't understand that, But he won't apologize because he's an entitled little prick who only went to church. He was a virgin. He was a virgin, my ass. He was a virgin. Scott in Dallas.
Hi, Randy. Thanks for taking my call.
Yep.
I was going to join in on the conversation. This guy, Kavanaugh, I was telling, I guess Sean answered the phone, was
Scott.
What if this was one of those senators?
Scott.
Yes, hi. Hi?
No, his name is Scott. Your name is Scott, and his name is Scott.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. But what if the senators, one of this, Mrs. Ford, Dr. Ford, was one of their daughters or sister. And then also Kavanaugh, he already showed through this interview process, he didn't have the temperament to be a judge. Even in his current position, he called this thing a disgrace, a circus, and then asking Senator, the senator from Wisconsin.
Klobuchar, Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah, answering her question with, what do you drink? Do you black out?
Well, he did it to Shelton Whitehouse, too. He said, I like beer. What do you drink, Senator? What do you drink? What do you like to drink? Yeah. And he did it to Amy Klobuchar after Amy Klobuchar had explained to him that her father, who is now 90 years old, still struggles with alcoholism, still goes to AA meetings to try and keep himself sober at 90. And he had the nerve to ask her, what do you drink? Do you have a drinking problem? Huh? Do you have a drinking problem?
Right.
This is a snot-nosed, elitist little prick who knows that he's got cover. He can say, he can do whatever he wants. And you know why? Because
go ahead.
I was just going to say, because all these men want is power. Period. They will lie to get it. They will cheat to get it. They will steal to get it. Obviously, we have a president who has worked with a foreign government to get it. They have no integrity, no principles, no character, no dignity.
And Kavanaugh has no respect to be able to talk like that in front of the senators like that. Imagine if he says that in front of them, what does he say behind closed doors to maybe his family or the people that works for him as his current position? But before the call ends, I wanted to also point out the House has passed, it's kind of gone over the radar, that a $3.8 trillion another tax cut that's supposed to go in, I think, in 2025. So listeners know that these great fiscal conservatives are spending our money like left and right.
Well, they're not spending it. They're paying themselves.
Everybody vote. Please vote.
I just don't want to use the wrong word. They're not spending our money. They're redistributing our money. They're stealing our money. They're heisting our money. We pay taxes, and they give it to themselves over and over and over and over and over again. And here's another lie. Here's another lie Brett Kavanaugh told. When he threatened, what comes around goes around. Remember that? You're going to get yours.
Yes.
Right. When he threatened the Democrats that way, he said Democrats were spending millions of dollars against him. $12 million has been spent by the Judicial Crisis Network for him in these stupid TV commercials. So that's another lie.
I've seen
the
those.
man cannot tell the truth. And these senators don't give a damn about their children, about their daughters, about their wives, about their safety. They only care about power. That's it, period. End of story.
You're right. I mean, they only care about getting reelected. Just vote them out. It's time to put in term limits in the House and the Senate. I'm tired of all these old people up there. I mean, they say they don't like government, but how many of them have been like 20 and 30 years in Congress and in the Senate? It's ridiculous, and people need to get fed up because this. I've never been more fed up in my life. I've disagreed with Republicans and other Democrats on policy, but I've never just despised and saw cowardice and complicity to not speak out against a wrong and against this president and then against this judicial Supreme Court nominee. This guy's terrible.
Terrible.
Please go vote, everybody. Please go vote.
Thank you. I mean, honestly, the idea that we can't find anybody of a higher caliber, somebody more forthright, somebody more honest, somebody more integrous, somebody with more dignity, somebody with more self-respect than this man is bizarre. This is just like our elections, because of the Electoral College. It's just like, we have 350 million Americans, and it always comes down to these are your two choices. And that's all you get. Well, are you telling me that there are no other qualified individuals in this country who could ascend to the Supreme Court? I mean, there are only 9 jobs in this country like these. 9 jobs. And believe me, there are plenty of people in this country, plenty of them that you've never heard of, that I've never heard of, who could step forward and be considered for the Supreme Court because they're smart enough, because they have a judicial temperament, because they've been a lower court judge, because the community, no, we're stuck with this guy. Why this guy? Because this guy is a liar. This guy has no principles. This guy is dishonest. This guy will do whatever he's told. This guy is a Republican operative. This guy is partisan. This guy is not a neutral arbiter of the law. And this guy will change the entire civil rights dynamic in this country. The entire freedom that women have had in this country since I was a little kid. I've never ever been a mature, a woman in a country where I couldn't take care of my own contraceptive needs, where I couldn't take care of my own reproductive desires. I've never lived in a country like that. And we're about to. It was tough enough for these women back in the 80s to go report these kinds of crimes. Try being in the military and report these kinds of crimes. Try it. Go ahead. You try it. 1 in 4 women in the military are raped. Do you see a lot of rape trials going on in the military? Because I don't. This is a sickness. There's something so ugly and wrong about wanting to go back before 1920 when women couldn't vote. It's bizarre, this world that we live in. It's bizarre. This cannot happen. I don't think everybody's going to come and everybody's going to say after they see what he's doing, after they see what he does, after they see an a rollback of, contraception in healthcare plans, after they see, that bakers can deny, this person or that person, access to their, after they see Roe v. Wade be chipped away and chipped away and chipped away, and women are just barefoot and pregnant again, they'll all say, why didn't you say something? Why didn't we know this? Well, you did. You freaking knew. You know now. And it's much easier to do something now than it is to do something once he's seated. I already heard Nancy Pelosi today. Somebody asked her, if the Democrats win the majority in the House and if you're elected leader again, which won't happen. Everybody's had it. Will you consider impeaching Brett Kavanaugh? And her answer was, no. I already have a lot of pressure to impeach Donald Trump. And I don't need to have pressure to impeach Kavanaugh. Let's see where the FBI investigation goes. I got news for you. The FBI investigation is going to be over tonight. That's it. It's done. Mitch McConnell tomorrow is going to say they found nothing, and Friday they're going to vote. And removing somebody is so much harder than saying you failed the job interview. There are only 9 jobs like this, and we want the best person for it, and that would not be you. How hard is that for them to do? We want the best person for this job. There are only 9 jobs like this job. The people do not get to vote, and we want the best person, and that is not you. You have lied under oath about torture. You lied under oath about shepherding other judicial nominees. You said you weren't involved. Obviously, there's emails now that say that you were. You lied about that. You lied about receiving stolen emails. You lied about being at these parties. You lied about being a choir boy. God, the idea that you drank in high school and college, who the hell gives a rat's ass, except that you were a bad drunk and you would get drunk and you would take advantage of women and you got women drunk and drugged women in order to make it easier for yourself because you're such a freaking lazy slob that you couldn't even be bothered with having any moves. So we're going to find the best person for this job. You're not it. They won't do that. They won't do that. Mitch McConnell is a piece of crap. He's the one who said that the black president doesn't get to put Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court. Held that seat open. Delay. And now he's got the nerve to stand there and say there's some deadline, some arbitrary deadline. Well, the deadline's passed because it was yesterday. The Supreme Court already heard 2 oral arguments yesterday. You got a guy in college that said him and his friend Chris Dudley, who vouched for him, that Chris Dudley smashed a glass into another guy's head, and Brett Kavanaugh was the one that started the fight because he was throwing ice cubes at this guy, egging him on, and when the guy threw a punch at Kavanaugh, Dudley, his basketball buddy, threw a glass at this guy's head, and the guy had to go to the hospital, had stitches, there was an arrest and all. What kind of a person lies about all this crap? Just say, I was young, I was stupid, I did these things, whatever. No, Mitch McConnell, we're going to plow through. End debate tomorrow, vote on Friday. And Nancy Pelosi, no, even though he's lied about all these things, about torture and warrantless wiretapping and about shepherding other judges and about covering up other judges' racist histories and pasts and millions of emails that show that he got stolen documents and lied about it in 4 and 6. No, I'm not going to impeach him.